section 2, chapter 7, which starts at page 163. Now, when I use the term the influence of the stars, what comes to your mind? Astrology. Why? Okay, what alarm goes off when we hear astrology? Horoscopes, prohibited, right? We're not supposed to go, divine the horoscope and find out what it's talking about. Though one can do those things, but it's not right. Just like we can speak to the dead, but you're not supposed to. You're prohibited from doing those things. Obvious, if one could not divine from the stars, it wouldn't be prohibited. Does that make sense? So it's clear you can provide some divination or some prediction from the stars, but this is not what it's talking about. Now, let me provide a bit of explanation before we get into it. We all know that in natural science, the stars and the constellations play an important part of how life is on this earth, right? On a very basic level, when we eat, eating is for one purpose. What is that one purpose? To do mitzvah, to survive, to live, and to enjoy life and serve Hashem with gladness. That's simple. So food is created to influence us to do mitzvahs. Now, when we say the influence of the stars, it's like saying the influence of your food. You remember the little food chart when you were kids growing up, a little triangle, and you are what you eat? And I often thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be a big, big fruit pop, right? Now, there's an influence of all kinds of things. The stars have a constellation have an influence on us, and we will discuss that now. It says in the first section, in chapter 1, section 1, chapter 5, verse 2, or paragraph 2, it says, we discussed how every physical phenomenon has its root among the transcendental forces. First, the thing is rooted in the spiritual realm and in all the necessary ways. Afterwards, it is committed more and more to the material until it finds itself in the form that is desired for the physical realm. It is for the sake of this purpose that the stars and the planets were created. Through their movements and cycles, influences in the spiritual realm are transmitted and reflected to their physical counterparts. Now, I want to tell you right now, when I read this tonight, I am not even for a second going to tell you I understand what it's saying. Okay, I can tell you and explain to you, but I don't understand how the mechanism works. That's like me getting up here and reading you some information from physics and nuclear science, and I can read it to you and I can explain it to you, but I couldn't tell you how it works. Okay, so I'm just being honest with you. So if you think I'm going to tell you how things work tonight, forget it. It's not going to happen. It's ironic that we in modern times are more thunderstruck by the lights on the ground than we do in the heavens. We're always worried, we talk about the lights in Martha and the UFOs and the shooting, this and that, and we don't realize that there are trillions and millions of planets in the sky. The ancients, though, were indeed nonplussed by the overarching ring of the galaxies over their heads. It is because they were more heavenly centered than we were. When we say the ancients, we're talking about all the way back to the very beginning. The stars in the heaven spoke to them. As a matter of fact, Hashem said the stars are for the appointed times and seasons. It's to give you the time that God is going to do things for you. So the stars in the heaven has a place in our life. Unfortunately, in our modern time, we don't look in the heavens as much as we should. It is because they were more heavenly centered than we, and we are more centered, and we're more earth-centered than they, probably. But be that it may be, it is clear that they realize the power of the galaxies while we simply don't. So tonight, I hope to explain the power of the galaxy and how it plays an integral part in our lives. You've heard of biorhythms. We know that our water levels are affected by the tide, correct? That's why they say if you're going to mikveh, you mikveh in the low tide. So you make sure that you are in the deepest part of the water. You're going to go out there so you can make sure that nothing's changed. Perhaps that's why the following statement by God doesn't quite move us. God is revealed to us to have told us the following. I created 12 constellations in the firmament. I created 30 hosts for each one. For each host I created 30 legions, and each legion I created 30 cohorts, and for each cohort I created 30 manipolies. And each manipoli I created 30 camps, and I've attached 365,000 myriads of stars to each camp, all for your sake. Barachot 32b. Now what does that say? This is a section of the Talmud. This is not in the Word. A lot of stars. As a matter of fact, if you look at that book, The Coming Revolution, can you grab it for me real quick and bring it up here? The Coming Revolution, fantastic book. It uses this formula that is listed here. This is by Rabbi Zamir Cohen. Fantastic book. How many have seen it? You guys have seen this book? In the book, he actually goes through and describes.
They can find that book if they email Rabbi
Yaron Reuven? Okay. Yeah, this is a fantastic book. It's something you need in your library just to refer to. It is through this explanation that we find out how many stars there are. And it's interesting that the Talmud knew how many stars were in the constellation before NASA did. And then when NASA was able to calculate it, it was only within a point, like a few points between the difference between NASA's scientific count and what the Talmud put out hundreds of years ago. Now, tell me that Torah isn't divine, right?
Where can you email?
You can email Rabbi Yaron Reuven, and we can give you the information, okay? Very easy. I got mine off of Amazon, but I don't know if it's available on Amazon anymore. Is it?
Yeah, Rabbi Reuben sent them out.
Okay. He'll send them out for free. So we'll post it up on the stream, live stream. The implication here is that these systems are like cogs in a wheel or gears in a motor. Does that make sense? It's like we look at a fine piece of machinery like a Mercedes-Benz or whatever, Maserati, and all we are seeing is the outside shell. We're seeing the beauty of the shined chrome and beautiful cabling that's all perfectly laid out, but what we don't see inside is all of these intricate gears that cause the engine to run at such great precision and to run at high volumes for a long period of time without blowing up. Well, the creator of the universe has set all this universe up, not as eye candy. He set it up so that not only does the constellations influence the physicality, somehow it influences the spiritual. How does that work? I don't know. That's the part I don't understand. So let's go on. He says the system also includes specific, this is in paragraph 5. It says, I'm sorry, let's go to the bottom of paragraph 1. It says that is, all things in the physical world are given the power to exist through influences transmitted to them via their prospective stars. For through the agency of the stars, each thing's essence is brought to earth, reflected by the spiritual roots on high down to the physical. God says to his people that he would cause it to rain from the heavens. Rain from the heavens, or the water from the heavens. And the Hebrew of that is not in the firmament, but in space. People have wondered, well, what is that supposed to mean? But we realize that our water is constantly replenished. Thank you very much. Is replenished by meteors that are full, just chunks of ice that shower down and sort of repopulate the water. The water that has been here has been the water that's been here from the beginning, but it's constantly refurbished by the water that comes from space. Now you say, okay, that's part of a constellation that keeps us hydrated. So if that is the case, there is also influences of the stars in other areas. So let's look at paragraph 2. It says, there's another function that God assigned to the stars. Every event and situation in the material world is prepared and initiated on high, then is transmitted via the stars, step by step, finally appearing to the desired physical forms below. For example, life itself, wealth, wisdom, children, and so forth, all originate on the high in the realm of the spiritual roots, reflected down through the branches of these roots through the agency of the particular stars, so that the different phenomena take form on earth in the desired states. This is the result of a particular division and combinations of stars following their specific cycles. So let me take just a moment to share with you some notes. We're going to lay out the cosmic process of interaction between heaven and earth so that we can get more detail. Everything that happens on earth is initiated from above. As we have said, by God at first, then through the transcendental forces, where the formation to be culminated is then stored. The planets and stars then transmute and translate all this information to the earthly form in general. As we learned last time, the point to be made now is that that information is then applied to the form that is appropriate to each individual from every happenstance. Meaning that somehow that every constellation in the stars, you remember when Abraham was told to look at the stars of the heavens, your people shall be like the stars of the heaven. And imagine that every star, every planet in heaven has an influence on every person. How does that work? I don't understand it. We need to have some great Kabbalist to come speak to us and tell us this, and we'll know. The broad, overarching, and far-reaching life themes touched by this process include mortality, well-being, sustenance, intellect, family life, and the like. Now, the ancients would use the stars to predict what kind of child they were going to have, what kind of winters they were going to have, and they could look at the constellations to figure this out. It says, but the stars and the planets don't only transmute this information from heaven. As a matter of course, each one lends to the particular hue and tone of whatever it affects. Thus, each element of our life is affected by the particular star or planet with its own makeup, character, and idiosyncrasies, as well as by the combination of the stars and planets in the cosmos. Now, think about this for a second. Hashem has angels working for him in every case, correct? All the way down to the nation, angels are working for Hashem, and people, God has his angels or his messengers have his bid and call, correct? We all are very aware that the angelic host does things that affect us spiritually, influences at some level to help us to draw close to Hashem, or maybe even influences a situation to bring judgment upon us. While knowing that, we still don't consult angels, do we? Why? Because they're not Hashem and we're forbidden to, correct? I think it's kind of funny that we often hear in some circles, especially in other religions, where they command angels to do things. They talk to their spirit guide, which is an angel. The issue is we're taking the focus off of the creator of the universe, who is the source of all things, and putting it upon an angel. What this text is trying to show us is that the constellations have the same kind of effects. It draws down, it's somehow the constellations help to affect our purpose in this world. Whether it influences us to keep gravity and water and all those things, or whether it's transmitting, it seems to say that the constellations help to transfer or transmit this influence from the heavenly. I mean, that's mind-blowing to me. But at the same time, we're told not to consult the stars. For some reason, the Ramchal says that we should still have the knowledge that this influences us, that the tides influences us, that the moon influences, the stars influences. That's what we're coming to understand. We're in... We're all a part of it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Right. And so, the idea is that the whole of it from on high, from the highest element, every moment below is one sort of giant, what we call cosmic stew. We're all part of the same thing. You know, they send a probe to Mars and look at it, and you think, oh, it's way out there. But we're all part of this whole system. I don't know if you guys remember seeing the movie Men in Black, the first one. Remember this? Remember when they were looking for the cat? You'd remember this, Sandy. You're the cat lover. And the cat had a jewel on it. Remember this? And when they opened the jewel, it was a whole constellation in the jewel. Do you remember this? You got to watch it. It's cool. So when they opened it up, these quote-unquote aliens were trying to protect their whole constellation that they lived in. They were protecting it. And this whole constellation was in this little marble-sized ball. And we think we're something big. We send missions to Mars and we send them to the moon, et cetera, et cetera. We think, oh, we're so great. But we're just little specks of a constellation inside the creator of the universe. You think the creator's big, but just think about it. We all reside within the creator. Nothing exists outside of the creator. So that means the far reaches of the farthest galaxy, hundreds of millions of light years away, is still in the creator. Can you wrap your brain around that? And that everything the creator transmits, he transmits through his creation. That's why he uses supernatural events, but uses creation to do it. It's amazing to me. In paragraph 3, it says, every human being, both Jew and non-Jew, is subjugated to this system. And whatever happens to him as a result of this astrological influence, however it happens to him, is a result of this astrological influence. It is also possible, however, that this stellar influence be overridden by a higher power. This is normally true in the case of the Jews, and according to the sages that teach there is no constellation or mazal for Israel, the power of God's decrees influence is stronger than the stars. Meaning, the constellation system is set in motion, is set in stone. This is how it's going to work. Nothing's going to change it until God holds the sun for a few hours till a battle's done. Does that make sense? He controls everything. And he's the only one that can change the decree of what something should happen. So remember, the constellations have a mission, but the mission can always be, what's the word for it? Altered through miraculous power. Let's see if I have some notes on this, on 4. I like this. Never forget, though, that the planets and the stars aren't independent entities with power on their own. Just like angels are not independent agencies with power on their own. As some mistakenly assume, that's why they have worship of stars and worship of constellations. Indeed, the Jewish understanding of their role in their grand scheme of things is very different from others. Others believe that the planets and the stars hold sway over our lives and are a force not to be denied. As we've been indicating, we believe that God uses their electric, majestic push and pull to affect us, but not to determine our fate. Make sense? Of course they affect us. But we're not out bowing down to the stars and asking the stars to, our lucky charms, right? Our lucky stars, right? We're not asking for the constellations to show us favor. You could see maybe a primitive people doing that. The American Indians maybe would have done that. But still, I think most American Indian tribes would say the Great Spirit is the one that would influence the stars in this situation. For the constellations indeed are beholden to the rules of God, has them followed, and are limited to what they can do. So let's try to illustrate the actual role the constellations play in our lives by the means of an analogy. Imagine, if you will, that we are seeds in the soil of a boundless field rather than individuals in a vast space. Look upon the planets and the stars in the context as relatively large pebbles or clumps of soil in close enough proximity to us that affect the way of life, giving water and minerals to us. And thus the quality of life, see them and use in the context, you become closer to the idea of the place of the constellation in the big picture. Do you get that? You following? Make sure you're following. So just like a plant, a seed put in the ground, the rocks, the pebbles, the minerals are all part of causing that plant to grow and to do well. So is the constellations in the rest of creation. It is not that they have the power over us and the rule of heaven, God forbid. It is that in their relative proximity to us, they affect our experience of God, life-giving, radiant splendor to a great degree. Some individuals can determine approximately how much of the constellation affects us by reading them. That is astrology. But those individuals can indeed be far off, since our knowledge of the forces behind the planets and stars are limited. Also, because the planets and stars' influences are often overridden by God's will, we are, as we have indicated. With this being said, we approach the last section, and I want to read this. This is the meaning of what the prophet says in Yeshayahu 47:13. Not let the astrologers and stargazers and fortune tellers stand up and tell you something about what what may come upon you. Our sages tell us that this means that they can predict something, but certainly not everything. Make sense? So when someone says that the astrology page in the newspaper is just a bunch of bunk and there's no meaning to it, they could tell you some stuff, but they really don't know what they're talking about, right? Yeah, there's some things that could be found probably in the stars if they were experts. But the idea is ultimately God is the one who predicts everything. God is the one who does everything. He's the source of all life, and nothing exists outside of Him. Now that concludes this lecture. If you have any questions or comments, now would be the time to share them. Yes, ma'am.
How come you have